Part 1. The salvage vessel Aurora's Dream drifted silently through the debris field of what had once been the Kepler station, its hull scarred from 3 days of desperate flight through hostile space. Captain Jake Morrison wiped grease from his hands as he emerged from the engine compartment, his weathered face grim with the knowledge that their luck had finally run out. The ship's fusion reactor was dying, its containment field fluctuating wildly despite every patch job he and his crew had managed in the past 72 hours. Behind him, the soft hum of failing systems provided a constant reminder that they were living on borrowed time in the cold vacuum between stars. "Jake, we've got company," called Rebecca Thompson from the pilot's seat, her voice tight with tension as she studied the long-range sensors. The red-haired engineer-turned-pilot had been with Morrison's crew for 6 years, ever since the corporate wars had left them all unemployed and searching for work on the outer rim. Her fingers danced across the holographic display, zooming in on the massive signatures approaching from the edge of the system. 3 ships, unknown configuration, but they're big. Really big. And they're moving fast. Dr. Marcus Williams looked up from his portable lab setup near the communications console, his dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of the alien technology samples they'd been studying. The xenoarchaeologist had hired Morrison's crew to investigate the ruins of an ancient civilization in this sector, but their discovery had attracted far more attention than any of them had bargained for. "Could they be the same ones who destroyed the station?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tyler Rodriguez checked the charge on his pulse rifle for the 3rd time in 10 minutes, the former colonial marine's instinct screaming that they were walking into a trap. His scarred hands moved with practiced efficiency as he verified their meager weapon systems, though he knew that against ships of that size, their defensive capabilities were essentially meaningless. "Doesn't matter who they are," he said grimly. "With our reactor failing, we can't run, and we sure as hell can't fight." The communication array crackled to life with an alien transmission, the universal translator struggling to process the complex linguistic patterns. When the message finally resolved into recognizable words, the tone was unmistakably condescending. "Primitive vessel, you have violated sacred space and disturbed the resting place of the ancestors. Prepare to be boarded for judgment by the Zephyrian conclave. Any resistance will result in immediate termination." Morrison felt his jaw clench as he recognized the arrogance in the alien's voice. Throughout his 20-year career as a Starship engineer, he'd encountered dozens of species who assumed that humanity's relatively recent entry into galactic civilization meant they were technologically inferior. The Zephyrians, apparently, were no different. He'd heard stories about their empire from other traders, a species that had conquered half the galaxy through superior technology and an unshakable belief in their own supremacy over lesser races. "They're powering weapons," Thompson reported, her hands hovering over the emergency systems as 3 sleek vessels emerged from hyperspace. Each ship was easily 10 times the size of the Aurora's Dream, their crystalline hulls gleaming with an inner light that spoke of technology far beyond human understanding. "Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast." Williams gathered his research data with shaking hands, his mind racing through the implications of their discovery. The ancient ruins they'd been studying contained technology that predated the Zephyrian Empire by millions of years, artifacts that suggested the galaxy's current power structure wasn't as permanent as everyone believed. "If they get their hands on what we found down there," he began, but Morrison cut him off with a sharp gesture. "They won't," the captain said firmly, moving to his command station as the alien ships began their approach. He'd spent his entire adult life working with Starship systems, from the crude chemical rockets of humanity's early space age to the sophisticated quantum drives that powered modern vessels. Every species built their technology differently, but the underlying principles remained remarkably consistent across the galaxy. Energy had to be channeled, matter had to be manipulated, and information had to be processed, regardless of whether the builders had tentacles, scales, or skin. The first Zephyrian boarding pods launched with lethal precision, their trajectory calculated to breach the Aurora's Dream's hull at its weakest points. As the alien vessels drew closer, their crews no doubt preparing to deal with another group of primitive scavengers who had stumbled into something beyond their comprehension. Morrison allowed himself a thin smile. The Zephyrians were about to learn what every other species in the galaxy eventually discovered about humanity, that sometimes the most dangerous assumption you could make was that someone else didn't know what they were doing. Part 2. The boarding pod struck the Aurora's Dream with controlled violence, their magnetic clamps sealing against the hull as cutting torches began carving through reinforced titanium alloy like it was tissue paper. Morrison watched the hull breach indicators light up across his command console, each red warning symbol representing another section of his ship being violated by alien technology that operated on principles his crew wasn't supposed to understand. The atmosphere in the cargo bay rushed out into space as the first pod completed its work, and within moments, 6-foot-tall figures in gleaming environmental suits stepped through the breach with the casual confidence of a species that had conquered 1,000 worlds. The Zephyrians moved with fluid grace, their elongated limbs and angular features visible through the transparent aluminum of their helmets, while scanner arrays built into their armor swept the ship's interior with methodical precision. Their leader, distinguished by the intricate crystalline patterns etched into his suit, activated a translation matrix that filled the air with his amplified voice. "Humans," the Zephyrian commander said, the word dripping with disdain as his silver eyes surveyed the cramped confines of the salvage vessel. "Your species persists in meddling with forces beyond your primitive comprehension. The artifacts you have stolen belong to civilizations that achieved transcendence while your ancestors were still crawling through mud." His three-fingered hand gestured dismissively at the exposed wiring and jury-rigged systems that kept the Aurora's Dream functional, a stark contrast to the seamless technology of his own equipment. "Surrender the ancient devices immediately, and your deaths will be swift rather than prolonged." Rodriguez stepped forward, his pulse rifle held in a non-threatening position but ready to move at a moment's notice, while Thompson kept her hands visible on the navigation console. Williams clutched his research samples protectively, knowing that the data they contained could revolutionize humanity's understanding of galactic history, but Morrison held up a hand to forestall any hasty actions. The captain's weathered face showed none of the fear that the Zephyrians expected to see from a member of such a young species, instead displaying the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades solving impossible problems with limited resources and unlimited creativity. "Before we discuss terms," Morrison said evenly, "maybe you could help us with a technical issue we're having. Our fusion reactor is acting up, and I'd hate for it to destabilize while your people are aboard." The Zephyrian commander's helmet display flickered as his suit's sensors confirmed the reactor's erratic behavior, and for the first time since boarding, a note of concern entered his voice. Fusion destabilization was a messy way to die, regardless of species, and even Zephyrian technology couldn't completely protect against the superheated plasma that would result from a containment failure. "Your primitive reactor poses no threat to us," the commander replied, though his scanner readings were telling a different story. The fusion chamber's magnetic bottles were fluctuating in patterns that defied conventional physics, creating resonance cascades that should have been impossible with human technology. "However, we will stabilize your systems to prevent unnecessary complications during our salvage operation." He gestured to two of his subordinates, who immediately began moving toward the engine compartment with the confident stride of technicians who had never encountered a system they couldn't master. Morrison exchanged a quick glance with Thompson, who was already bringing up the ship's internal schematics on her workstation. Every conduit, every relay, and every processing node in the Aurora's Dream was mapped in exquisite detail, the result of 20 years spent maintaining vessels that were held together through ingenuity rather than superior materials. The Zephyrians moved through the corridors with their scanners active, cataloging what they assumed was crude human engineering while completely missing the subtle modifications that Morrison had spent the past 3 days implementing throughout the ship's infrastructure. "Your reactor design is even more primitive than our databases indicated," one of the Zephyrian technicians reported over the comm system, his voice filled with professional disdain as he examined the fusion chamber's control systems. "The magnetic containment protocols are laughably inefficient, and these manual override systems are so crude they barely qualify as technology." His companion began interfacing with the reactor's control matrix, confident that Zephyrian computational power could easily master any system designed by a species that had achieved faster-than-light travel less than 2 centuries ago. Williams watched nervously as alien technology began integrating with their ship systems, knowing that once the Zephyrians gained control of their reactor, resistance would become impossible. The ancient artifacts they discovered were already sealed in a containment field that Morrison had personally modified, but he wondered if even their captain's legendary technical skills would be enough to outmaneuver a species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Rodriguez maintained his vigilant position near the cargo bay entrance, ready to buy them precious seconds if the situation deteriorated, while Thompson's fingers hovered over her console, waiting for Morrison's signal. The Zephyrian commander studied the human crew with calculating eyes, already planning how their interrogation would proceed once his technicians had secured the ship's systems. He had overseen the subjugation of dozens of species, and humans would prove no different from the rest, briefly defiant, ultimately helpless, and quickly forgotten once their usefulness had ended. The crystalline patterns on his armor pulsed with satisfaction as his technicians reported successful integration with the primitive fusion reactor, unaware that they had just given Morrison exactly what he needed to turn their technological superiority against them. Part 3. The moment the Zephyrian technicians completed their interface with the Aurora's Dreams reactor systems, Morrison felt the subtle vibration through the deck plating that told him their computational matrix had fully integrated with his ship's network, exactly as he had hoped when he'd spent those 3 desperate days in the engine compartment. The aliens' confidence in their technological superiority had blinded them to the possibility that the primitive human systems they were so eager to control might contain surprises that their advanced scanners couldn't detect, modifications hidden within seemingly crude manual overrides and backup circuits that appeared to serve no logical purpose. Thompson caught the captain's almost imperceptible nod and began implementing the first phase of their plan, her fingers moving across seemingly random controls while the Zephyrian commander remained focused on Williams and the precious cargo of ancient artifacts that had brought them all together in this remote corner of space. "Your reactor is now stable," the lead technician reported with barely concealed smugness, his voice carrying the tone of someone who had just performed a minor miracle for the benefit of inferior beings. "The magnetic containment field has been optimized according to proper engineering principles, and your power output has increased by 47%. Perhaps your species will learn something useful from observing our methods." The other Zephyrian nodded in agreement as he finished downloading what he assumed was the complete technical specifications of human fusion technology, data that would be valuable for understanding the capabilities and limitations of this newest addition to their empire. Morrison allowed himself a small smile as he watched the aliens' confidence grow with each passing moment, knowing that their superior technology was about to become their greatest weakness. During his decades as a Starship engineer, he had learned that every system, no matter how advanced, operated according to fundamental principles that remained constant across species and civilizations. Energy flowed through circuits, data moved along pathways, and control signals activated responses, but the specific methods used to accomplish these tasks varied wildly depending on the engineering philosophy of their creators. The Zephyrians built everything according to rigid hierarchical protocols, with centralized control systems that could be accessed and commanded by sufficiently advanced computational matrices, a design philosophy that served them well when dealing with technology they understood. Williams carefully shifted his position to block the commander's view of Thompson's workstation, engaging the alien in animated discussion about the significance of the artifacts while Rodriguez maintained his alert stance near the cargo bay breach. "These relics represent technology that predates your empire by millions of years," the xenoarchaeologist said earnestly, his academic enthusiasm providing perfect cover for their activities. "The computational matrices we discovered suggest that the ancients achieved a level of technological integration that modern civilizations can barely comprehend." The Zephyrian commander's eyes gleamed with interest as he considered the implications, unaware that his own computational matrix was already beginning to process data streams that had been carefully crafted for this exact scenario. The beauty of Morrison's plan lay in its elegant simplicity. Rather than trying to fight Zephyrian technology directly, he had designed their ship systems to be seductive to alien scanners, presenting what appeared to be inefficient human engineering that could be easily improved through superior computational power. The hidden subroutines embedded within their reactor controls were invisible to conventional analysis, disguised as redundant safety protocols and backup systems that seemed typical of human over-engineering, but once activated by the proper command sequence, they would propagate through any connected network with devastating effectiveness. Thompson's fingers danced across her console as she initiated the second phase, sending what appeared to be routine diagnostic queries through the interface that the Zephyrian technicians had so helpfully established. Fascinating, the commander murmured as he studied Williams' data, completely absorbed in the potential implications of ancient technology while his ship's systems began processing the innocent-looking diagnostic packets that were spreading through their network like digital wildfire. The Zephyrians had spent millennia perfecting their computational architecture, creating seamless integration between all ship systems that allowed for unprecedented efficiency and control, but this same integration created pathways that could be exploited by someone who understood the underlying principles of information theory. Morrison had spent 3 days not just repairing their reactor, but crafting a digital virus specifically designed to turn Zephyrian technological superiority against itself. Rodriguez noticed the subtle change first, a flicker in the alien's helmet displays that lasted only a fraction of a second before returning to normal, followed by an almost imperceptible pause in their movements as their suit computers processed unexpected data streams. The former colonial marine had seen enough electronic warfare during his military service to recognize the signs of a successful penetration attack, and he prepared himself for whatever chaos was about to unfold. Thompson's console showed the progression of their infiltration software as it spread through the Zephyrian network, each successful node compromise bringing them closer to complete system control, while Williams continued his enthusiastic discussion of ancient civilizations to maintain their cover. The Zephyrian commander suddenly stiffened as his personal communication array began receiving error messages from his ship's central computer, warnings about unauthorized access attempts and system anomalies that seemed to be originating from multiple locations simultaneously. His silver eyes narrowed as he realized that the primitive humans might not be as helpless as their initial assessment had suggested, but by then Morrison's carefully prepared surprises were already cascading through every connected system, turning the aliens' own technology into an instrument of their downfall. The next few minutes would determine whether human ingenuity could triumph over galactic arrogance, and Morrison intended to show the Zephyrians exactly why underestimating humanity was the most dangerous mistake they could possibly make. Part 4. The Zephyrian commander's helmet display erupted in cascading error messages as Morrison's virus reached the critical systems aboard the alien flagship, and what had begun as minor anomalies suddenly escalated into full-scale network failure that spread through their 3-ship formation like a digital plague. The commander's confident demeanor cracked as his suit's internal computer began interpreting the infiltration software as legitimate system updates, each malicious packet disguised as standard maintenance protocols that bypassed every security measure the Zephyrians had developed over their millennia of technological dominance. Morrison watched with grim satisfaction as the alien's superior computational power became their greatest vulnerability, their interconnected systems amplifying the virus's effects far beyond what any primitive human technology should have been capable of achieving. "Sir, we're experiencing massive system failures across all decks," one of the technicians reported frantically, his voice rising in panic as his scanner array began displaying impossible readings. The Zephyrian's 3-fingered hands moved desperately across his control interface, trying to isolate the source of the contamination while his suit's life support systems flickered between operational and emergency modes. "The corruption appears to be emanating from this vessel, but that's impossible. Human technology lacks the sophistication necessary for this level of network penetration." His companion was already backing away from the reactor controls, finally understanding that they had walked into a trap that had been carefully prepared for their arrival. Thompson's workstation displayed the complete network topology of the Zephyrian fleet as Morrison's infiltration software mapped every connection, every data pathway, and every control node throughout their ships with surgical precision. The aliens had built their technology around the assumption that no inferior species could possibly understand their computational architecture, creating systems with minimal internal security that relied entirely on external isolation for protection. Rodriguez moved smoothly to block the cargo bay exit as the Zephyrians began to realize their predicament, his pulse rifle now aimed directly at the commander while Williams continued gathering his research data with renewed urgency. You want to know the difference between human engineering and yours? Morrison asked conversationally, his weathered hands dancing across his own control console as he began accessing systems that the Zephyrians had thought were completely secure. You build everything to be perfect, efficient, and predictable. We build everything to be adaptable, redundant, and survivable. Your ships are masterpieces of engineering, but they're also single points of failure. The virus had reached the Zephyrian flagship's primary computer core, and Morrison could feel the alien ship's defenses crumbling as his carefully crafted code began rewriting fundamental operating protocols. The commander attempted to activate his emergency communication array to warn the other ships, but found that his suit's transmitter was now under external control, broadcasting only the signals that Morrison allowed through the compromised network. His silver eyes widened with something approaching fear as he began to comprehend the scope of the human's infiltration, understanding for the first time that his prey might actually be the predator in this encounter. The crystalline patterns on his armor dimmed as power was systematically diverted from non-essential systems, leaving him increasingly isolated within his own technological cocoon. Impossible, the lead technician whispered as his scanner finally detected the true extent of the network compromise, revealing that every system aboard their 3 ships was now responding to external commands that originated from the primitive human vessel. No species has ever achieved this level of integration with our technology. The computational requirements alone should have been beyond your capabilities. His voice carried the desperation of someone whose entire worldview was collapsing in real time, the fundamental assumptions about technological superiority that had defined Zephyrian civilization for millennia suddenly revealed as dangerous delusions. Morrison's fingers moved with practiced precision as he began assuming direct control of the alien fleet's primary systems, 20 years of engineering experience allowing him to understand their technology with an intuitive grasp that surprised even himself. The Zephyrians had built beautiful machines, but they had also built predictable ones, following design principles that remained constant across their entire technological base once you understood the underlying philosophy. Williams watched in amazement as diagnostic data from all 3 ships began flowing across Morrison's displays, revealing power distribution networks, weapon systems, and even life support controls that were now completely under human command. Your ships are now part of my fleet, Morrison announced calmly, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had just accomplished the impossible through superior understanding rather than superior firepower. The Zephyrian commander's environmental suit was now operating on minimal power, its life support systems maintained only at Morrison's discretion, while his 2 technicians found themselves completely cut off from their own equipment. Thompson began systematically downloading the complete technical specifications of Zephyrian technology, decades of advanced research flowing into their modest ship's data banks with each passing second. Rodriguez kept his weapon trained on the aliens while ensuring they couldn't reach any manual override systems, though it was becoming clear that such measures were unnecessary as their own technology held them prisoner more effectively than any physical restraint. The irony wasn't lost on any of the humans present. The Zephyrians' absolute faith in their technological superiority had made them completely dependent on systems they never imagined could be turned against them. William secured the last of his artifact data as Morrison began implementing the next phase of their plan, knowing that controlling the ships was only the beginning of what would be necessary to escape this situation alive. The alien commander struggled against his suit's increasingly restrictive control protocols, finally understanding that the primitive humans he had come to subjugate had instead made him a prisoner within his own armor, and that his mighty fleet was now nothing more than an extension of their humble salvage vessel's computational power. Part 5. Morrison's tactical display now showed 3 Zephyrian dreadnoughts hanging motionless in space like vast crystalline sculptures, their crews trapped within their own vessels as human-controlled systems maintained life support at minimal levels while denying access to weapons, communications, and navigation controls. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on the captain as he watched thousand-year-old warships reduced to expensive coffins by technology their builders had dismissed as primitive, but he knew that their current advantage was temporary at best. William spread his artifact data across the main holographic display, revealing the true scope of what they had discovered in the ancient ruins, while Thompson worked frantically to download everything she could from the Zephyrian databases before their captive fleet was inevitably missed by the Empire's command structure. "Jake, you need to see this," Williams said urgently, his dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of translated text that scrolled across his workstation in patterns that seemed to defy conventional understanding. The xenoarchaeologist's hands trembled slightly as he manipulated the holographic interface, bringing up star charts that showed the galaxy as it had existed millions of years before the rise of current civilizations. "These aren't just random artifacts we found down there. They're pieces of a defensive network that once protected the entire galaxy from something the ancients called the Void Seekers, entities from outside our reality that consume technological civilizations." The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow as he realized that their small archaeological expedition had stumbled upon evidence of a threat that made the Zephyrian Empire look like children playing with toys. The captured Zephyrian commander struggled against his suit's constraints as he overheard Williams' translation, his silver eyes widening with what might have been recognition or terror as the ancient warnings were spoken aloud for the first time in eons. Rodriguez noticed the alien's reaction and moved closer, keeping his pulse rifle ready while studying the prisoner's increasingly agitated behavior. "You understand what he's talking about, don't you?" the former Marine asked quietly, his combat instincts telling him that their captives knew far more about the galactic situation than they had initially revealed. The commander's helmet display flickered as he attempted to activate his translation matrix, but Morrison's control systems intercepted the signal and routed it through their own communications array. "The Void Seekers have not been seen for 3 million years, the commander said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of species memory that stretched back to the earliest days of galactic civilization. The Zephyrian archives speak of them only in whispers, describing entities that consumed entire star systems and left nothing but empty space in their wake. Our ancestors believed they had been permanently banished to the spaces between realities, sealed away by technology that no modern civilization could hope to understand." His three-fingered hands clenched within his environmental suit as he continued, "If you have truly discovered remnants of the ancient defensive network, then you have found something infinitely more valuable than any territorial conquest." Thompson's fingers flew across her console as she intercepted communications from the edge of the star system, her pilot's training allowing her to parse the complex signal patterns that were beginning to emerge from hyperspace transition points. "We've got more company incoming," she announced grimly, her red hair catching the light from her displays as she analyzed the sensor data. "Multiple signatures, different configurations from our current guests. Looks like word of our little party has spread." Morrison felt his stomach clench as he realized that their window of opportunity was rapidly closing, the brief advantage they had gained through superior understanding about to be overwhelmed by superior numbers. Williams continued translating the ancient texts while keeping one eye on the approaching fleet signatures, his academic training warring with the desperate urgency of their situation as he tried to extract actionable intelligence from million-year-old warnings. According to these records, the defensive network was designed to activate automatically when certain technological thresholds were crossed, but it required conscious activation by species that had proven their worthiness through what the ancients called adaptive ingenuity, rather than brute technological force. The xenoarchaeologist's voice grew excited despite their perilous circumstances as he began to understand the true significance of Morrison's accomplishment. "Jake, what you did to those Zephyrian ships, that kind of creative problem-solving combined with deep technical understanding, that might be exactly what the ancients were looking for." Rodriguez checked his weapon's charge indicator while scanning the approaching sensor contacts, his military experience telling him that they were about to be vastly outnumbered regardless of how many ships Morrison could control through his viral infiltration. "How long before the cavalry arrives?" he asked Thompson, who was already calculating intercept courses based on the new fleet's approach vectors. The answer she gave sent a chill through the cramped bridge of the Aurora's dream as they realized that their improvised victory was about to become a desperate last stand against forces that could overwhelm them through sheer numerical superiority. Morrison studied the ancient star charts while simultaneously monitoring the status of his captured Zephyrian fleet, his engineer's mind racing through possibilities as he tried to find a solution that didn't end with their destruction or capture. The virus that had given them control over 3 dreadnoughts was already beginning to decay as Zephyrian security protocols adapted to his intrusion methods, and he knew that within hours their technological advantage would evaporate completely. Williams' translation of the ancient texts offered a tantalizing possibility, but activating a million-year-old defensive network seemed like a desperate gamble that could either save the galaxy or destroy it, and Morrison found himself facing the most important decision of his life with less than perfect information and rapidly dwindling time. Part 6. The incoming fleet materialized from hyperspace with the coordinated precision of a military operation, revealing not just Zephyrian reinforcements but vessels from half a dozen different species, each one representing a galactic power that had received word of the ancient artifacts and intended to claim them for their own purposes. Morrison watched the tactical display populate with hostile contacts as Thompson's scanner array identified Vorthan battlecruisers, Kalari assault carriers, and even the distinctive bioships of the Threnari Collective, all converging on their position with the single-minded determination of predators who had caught the scent of ultimate power. The fragile alliance between these traditionally hostile species spoke volumes about the significance of what Williams had discovered in those ancient ruins, and Morrison realized that their small crew had inadvertently triggered what might become the greatest conflict in galactic history. "The degradation is accelerating," Thompson reported as her monitoring systems tracked the slow decay of Morrison's viral infiltration throughout the captured Zephyrian fleet. The alien security protocols were adapting faster than anticipated, identifying and quarantining the corrupted code with increasing efficiency as their automated defense systems learned to recognize the patterns that had initially fooled them. "We've got maybe 30 minutes before they regain full control of their ships, and that new fleet will be in weapons range in 20. Rodriguez positioned himself near the emergency bulkheads, knowing that once their technological advantage disappeared, they would be facing impossible odds with nothing but their wits and whatever weapons they could improvise from ship supplies. Williams frantically cross-referenced the ancient texts with the stellar cartography data that Thompson was pulling from the Zephyrian databases, his academic mind racing to solve a puzzle that had remained unsolved for millions of years while explosions of light marked the arrival of more hostile vessels. The network nodes were hidden throughout the galaxy, disguised as natural phenomena that aggressive species would ignore while being obvious to civilizations that had learned to look beyond surface appearances, he said breathlessly, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface as he overlaid ancient star charts with current galactic maps. "Jake, there's a node in this system. It's been masquerading as an unstable pulsar for the past 3 million years, but the activation sequence requires direct interface with technology that demonstrates the right kind of adaptive thinking." The Zephyrian commander had been listening to their desperate planning with growing alarm, his silver eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and desperate hope as he finally understood what the humans were attempting to accomplish. "You cannot possibly comprehend the magnitude of what you are considering," he said through gritted teeth, his voice distorted by the failing communication systems in his environmental suit. The ancient defensive network was designed to reshape the fundamental structure of spacetime itself, creating barriers that exist outside normal physical reality. If you activate it incorrectly, you could unravel the fabric of the galaxy itself. His words carried the weight of species memory that stretched back to the earliest days of galactic civilization, when the Zephyrians had first discovered fragments of ancient technology and learned to fear what they could not understand. Morrison felt the weight of decision pressing down on him as he watched the approaching fleets continue their relentless advance, each ship representing hundreds or thousands of crew members who would be caught in whatever cosmic forces he was about to unleash. The engineer in him demanded more data, more testing, more certainty before attempting to activate technology that he barely understood, but the realist in him knew that conventional escape was impossible and capture would doom not just his crew but potentially the entire galaxy to whatever the Void Seekers represented. Thompson's navigation display showed possible escape routes, but every vector was blocked by hostile vessels whose combined firepower could reduce the Aurora's Dream to component atoms within minutes of engagement. "The node is responding to our probe signals," Williams announced with barely contained excitement as his scanner array detected subtle changes in the pulsar's emission patterns. The ancient technology was recognizing their approach, analyzing their ship systems and crew complement according to criteria that had been established when their species was still confined to a single world, but somehow Morrison's improvised modifications to their vessel's architecture were triggering positive responses from monitoring systems that had remained dormant for eons. "It's running some kind of compatibility test, measuring our technological adaptability against predefined parameters. Jake, whatever you did to capture those Zephyrian ships, it's exactly what the ancients were looking for." Rodriguez watched the tactical display with growing unease as the approaching fleets began to establish attack formations, their various species setting aside millennia of mutual hostility in favor of claiming the ancient artifacts for themselves. "They're powering weapons," he reported grimly, his military training allowing him to read the energy signatures that were building across dozens of hostile vessels. The former Marine had survived battles against impossible odds before, but this situation was beyond anything in his experience as the greatest military powers in the galaxy prepared to unleash their full fury on a single salvage vessel that had stumbled upon secrets that could reshape the balance of power forever. Morrison made his decision with the calm certainty of someone who had spent his entire career solving impossible problems with inadequate resources, knowing that the next few minutes would either vindicate his faith in human ingenuity or result in the complete annihilation of everything he held dear. "Williams, send the activation sequence," he ordered quietly, his weathered hands moving across his control console as he began implementing modifications that would turn their humble salvage vessel into a direct interface with technology that predated galactic civilization itself. The ancient network had been waiting 3 million years for a species that combined technological sophistication with adaptive creativity, and Morrison intended to prove that humanity deserved to inherit the galaxy's greatest secrets. Part 7. The moment Williams transmitted the activation sequence to the disguised pulsar, reality itself seemed to pause as ancient machinery that had slumbered for 3 million years awakened with the slow majesty of a technological god stirring from eternal dreams. The pulsar's chaotic emissions suddenly stabilized into precise mathematical patterns that pulsed through hyperspace with increasing intensity, each beat sending gravitational waves cascading across the star system in harmonics that resonated through the quantum foam underlying spacetime itself. Morrison felt the Aurora's dream shudder as exotic energies began flowing through their ship's modified systems, the ancient network recognizing his jury-rigged technology as a valid interface and establishing connections that bypassed every known law of physics while somehow feeling perfectly natural to his engineer's intuition. The approaching hostile fleets suddenly found their sensors overwhelmed by readings that defied conventional understanding, as space around the pulsar began to fold and twist in ways that suggested the fundamental structure of reality was being rewritten according to principles that no modern civilization had ever encountered. Thompson's navigation systems exploded with impossible data as the network scanning protocols examined every vessel in the system, analyzing their technological signatures and crew complement with a thoroughness that penetrated beyond mere physical sensors into realms that touched the very essence of consciousness itself. The ancient AI that controlled the network had spent eons refining its understanding of what separated truly innovative species from those that merely accumulated technological power through conquest and theft, and Morrison's creative solution to capturing the Zephyrian fleet had triggered recognition protocols that identified humanity as worthy inheritors of galactic responsibility. Williams watched in awe as his translation software began receiving direct data streams from the network's central intelligence, information flowing into their modest computers at rates that should have overwhelmed their processing capacity but somehow integrated seamlessly with their existing systems in ways that enhanced rather than replaced their crude human technology. The Zephyrian commander's environmental suit suddenly blazed with new displays as the network began interfacing directly with his armor's computational matrix, bypassing Morrison's viral infiltration to establish communication protocols that had been embedded in Zephyrian technology since the earliest days of their civilization. "The first builders speak," he whispered in amazement, his silver eyes reflecting patterns of light that seemed to carry meaning beyond mere visual information. "They judge us worthy to witness the activation of defenses that have protected the galaxy since before our species achieved interstellar travel. The network recognizes the humans as inheritors of the ancient mandate to guard against threats from beyond the cosmic barriers." His words carried through the communication system to the other vessels in his fleet, and Morrison could see the Zephyrian crews responding with what appeared to be religious reverence as their ship's systems began displaying symbols that had been carved into their earliest temples. Rodriguez watched the tactical display transform as the hostile fleets found themselves caught in energy fields that rendered their weapon systems inoperative while leaving their life support and communication arrays completely functional, the ancient network demonstrating its ability to disable threats without resorting to destruction when faced with species that might yet prove worthy of preservation. The Vorthan battlecruisers that had been charging their main weapons suddenly found their power cores redirected toward emergency containment as the network's influence spread through their ships like benevolent lightning, while the bioships of the Threnari Collective discovered that their living hulls were responding to chemical signals that promoted cooperation rather than aggression. Each species was being evaluated according to criteria that had been established by civilizations that understood the difference between evolutionary potential and mere technological achievement, and Morrison realized that they were witnessing the galaxy's first comprehensive species assessment in millions of years. The pulsar's emissions reached critical resonance as the network's primary protocols fully activated, and suddenly space around their position began revealing structures that had been hidden beyond the boundaries of normal perception for eons beyond counting. Massive geometrical forms materialized from hyperspace like crystalline mountains that dwarfed even the largest dreadnoughts, their surfaces covered with patterns that seemed to shift between dimensions as they established defensive positions throughout the star system. Morrison felt his consciousness expand as the network granted him temporary access to sensor arrays that operated on principles beyond human understanding, allowing him to perceive the galaxy as the ancients had seen it, a vast ecosystem where technological species either learned to cooperate in the face of external threats or faced extinction at the hands of entities that consumed entire realities for sustenance. Williams discovered that his artifact samples were now glowing with internal light as they responded to the network's activation signals, each piece of ancient technology revealing its true purpose as components in a defensive matrix that spanned the entire galaxy. The Void Seekers aren't just another hostile species, he announced with growing excitement as the network's historical databases opened to his queries. They're entropy incarnate, beings from the spaces between universes that feed on the collapse of ordered civilizations. The network doesn't just defend against invasion, it actively promotes cooperation and innovation among worthy species while quarantining those that prove too aggressive or short-sighted to contribute to galactic defense. The xenoarchaeologist's academic training allowed him to process the implications faster than his companions, understanding that they had just activated a system designed to transform the galaxy's political structure from one based on conquest to one founded on collaborative survival. Thompson's communication array suddenly filled with incoming transmissions from every ship in the system as crews that had arrived as enemies found themselves compelled to share information and resources under the network's influence, ancient programming overriding millennia of hostility in favor of the greater imperative of galactic survival. Morrison realized that his decision to activate the network had fundamentally altered the balance of power throughout known space, transforming humanity from insignificant scavengers into the recognized coordinators of a defensive alliance that would reshape civilization itself. But he also understood that this new responsibility came with challenges that would test every aspect of human creativity and determination in the trials yet to come. Part 8. 6 months after the network activation, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching ships from dozens of species work together to build humanity's first major contribution to galactic infrastructure, a feat that would have been impossible before the ancient AI had fundamentally altered the political landscape of known space. The station orbited the former pulsar node, which had revealed itself to be a vast computational matrix that now served as the central hub for coordinating defensive preparations against threats that existed beyond the boundaries of normal reality. Morrison's weathered hands rested on the transparent aluminum viewport as he observed Zephyrian engineers working alongside human technicians to install quantum resonance arrays that would extend the network's protective influence to previously vulnerable sectors, their combined expertise creating technological marvels that neither species could have achieved alone. Thompson approached from the engineering section, her red hair now adorned with the crystalline communication implant that allowed direct interface with the network's coordination protocols, a modification that had become standard for species deemed ready for enhanced cooperation. The latest batch of recruits from Earth just finished their orientation, she reported with satisfaction, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had helped design the training programs that would prepare humanity for its new galactic responsibilities. Turns out that human adaptability translates perfectly to network integration. Our people are already proposing modifications to ancient systems that the AI admits it never considered. Morrison smiled at the news, knowing that humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to find unexpected solutions to seemingly impossible problems, a trait that the network valued above all the technological achievements of older civilizations. Dr. Marcus Williams emerged from the Archaeological Research Center that had been constructed around the original artifact site, his dark eyes bright with excitement as he carried data tablets containing translations of network archives that revealed the true scope of galactic history. "Jake, you need to see the latest findings," he said enthusiastically, spreading holographic displays across the observation deck that showed star charts spanning millions of years of galactic evolution. "The network has been guiding species development for longer than we imagined, gently nudging civilizations toward cooperation whenever possible while quarantining those that proved too aggressive for collaborative defense. Every major technological breakthrough in recorded history was influenced by subtle network interventions designed to prepare us for eventual contact with entities from beyond our reality." The implication staggered Morrison as he realized that humanity's rapid technological development hadn't been coincidence but rather the result of careful preparation for the role they now found themselves playing. Tyler Rodriguez joined them from the security briefing rooms where he had been training multi-species defense teams in tactical coordination, his scarred hands now carrying the modified pulse weapon that represented the latest collaboration between human engineering and alien material science. "The Void Seeker monitoring stations are reporting increased activity along the galactic rim," he announced grimly, his military experience allowing him to interpret the threat assessments that arrived daily from network surveillance posts. "Whatever's out there, it's testing our defenses more aggressively than it has in centuries. The network AI believes that our activation may have drawn their attention, but it also thinks we're finally ready to face them with a united galactic response." Rodriguez's words carried the weight of someone who understood that their small crew's decision to activate ancient technology had committed the entire galaxy to a conflict that would determine the survival of technological civilization itself. The Zephyrian commander who had once tried to capture them now served as Morrison's primary liaison to the older galactic powers, his silver eyes reflecting genuine respect as he approached their group with reports from the outer sectors. "The integration proceeds better than our most optimistic projections predicted," he said formally, though his tone carried warmth that would have been impossible before the network's influence had encouraged cooperation over conquest. Human innovation combined with Zephyrian computational power has produced defensive technologies that exceed anything in our historical databases. The network's central AI has requested that Captain Morrison consider accepting formal designation as coordinator for the Terra sector, a responsibility that would place your species at the center of our collaborative defense efforts. Morrison felt the weight of that offer, understanding that accepting would fundamentally alter humanity's relationship with the galaxy while placing enormous responsibility on a species that had achieved interstellar travel less than 2 centuries ago. Williams continued his enthusiastic presentation of archaeological findings, revealing that the ancient civilization that had built the network hadn't been destroyed by external threats but had instead transcended physical existence after successfully preparing the galaxy for self-defense. They left behind detailed instructions for species that proved worthy of inheriting their legacy, he explained excitedly, manipulating holographic displays that showed technological blueprints beyond current understanding. "The network isn't just a defensive system, it's a graduation test for civilizations that demonstrate the right combination of innovation, cooperation, and determination to protect others rather than simply accumulating power for themselves. We passed, Jake. Humanity passed the test that determines whether a species gets to help shape the galaxy's future or remains subject to the decisions of others." Thompson's communication implant chimed with incoming data from Earth, where the news of humanity's elevation to galactic coordinator status had triggered unprecedented global cooperation as governments and corporations alike recognized the magnitude of their new responsibilities. "The shipyards are running at maximum capacity," she reported with satisfaction, watching displays that showed human vessels launching from orbital facilities that had expanded dramatically to meet the network's construction requirements. "Every major power on Earth is contributing resources to the fleet buildup, and the collaboration protocols are working even better than the network predicted. Apparently, our species' tendency toward creative chaos is exactly what the galaxy needs to break out of the rigid thinking patterns that older civilizations develop over time. Morrison made his decision with the same calm certainty that had served him throughout his career as a Starship engineer, knowing that accepting the coordinator position would transform him from a simple salvage captain into one of the most important figures in galactic civilization. "Tell the network I accept," he said quietly, his weathered face reflecting the determination of someone who had spent his entire life solving impossible problems with inadequate resources and unlimited creativity. As the ancient systems acknowledged his acceptance and began integrating Earth's growing fleet into the galaxy's defensive network, Morrison realized that his crew's desperate gamble in a remote star system had accomplished something that no amount of military conquest could have achieved. They had earned humanity's place among the stars through the one quality that truly mattered in an infinite universe filled with unimaginable challenges. The galaxy had finally found defenders worthy of the ancient legacy, and the real adventure was just beginning.